Trump has been very transparent about the whole thing. The one thing we can't criticize Trump on is being deceitful. He's been completely upfront through his campaign, after he was inaugurated. He's been very clear. He's on Putin's side, and so I think that we just need to come to that understanding, and then adjust, our behavior accordingly, so that we can figure out how to help Ukraine without Donald Trump's support.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've had Sir Bill Browder on the show. We've spoken about this phone call between Trump and Putin that took place on Monday, why Putin even wants to have these phone calls when he has no intention of ending the war. We also speak to him about the fact that Donald Trump said that perhaps they'll do trade with Russia, perhaps that would be a bribe, but what would the United States really get out of it? What does Russia even have to offer when it comes to trade? We also speak to him about this red line that Donald Trump says he has a red line in his head of when he's going to take the US out of these discussions between Russia and Ukraine. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube. So Bill Browder, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Great to be here.
I think you and I should just clean up what's happened in the last few days. We've obviously seen this discussion between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, a two-hour phone call on Monday. Trump says this phone call went very well. He says the kind of what they got out of it is that an agreement that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire, the conditions being that this has to be negotiated between just the two parties. How optimistic are you that this ceasefire will happen?
Zero. I've got zero optimism that any ceasefire will happen. It's just plain as day that Putin has no intention of stopping the war. He has no intention of doing a ceasefire. And the only purpose of this call and the only purpose of these announcements is just a way to slightly save face, so it's not so humiliating for Donald Trump. Donald Trump during his campaign repeated over and over and over that he was going to solve this war in one day. Obviously, he didn't solve this war in one day. And then it became 100 days. And then it became, I don't know. And then it became, well, how about just a 30-day ceasefire? And so this is not an agreement to do anything other than agree a process to possibly agree a possible ceasefire, so that you can then possibly negotiate an end to this war. And so it's a nothing, or using Trump's language, it's a nothing burger that's happened. And and everybody in Washington is now trying to spin this as some type of diplomatic success. It's nothing.
So Bill, your takeaway from this phone call is that it was Donald Trump trying to prove that he can at least get Putin on the phone.
Well, he can get Putin on the phone anytime he wants. It's Putin who needs to get Donald Trump on the phone. Putin is the one who's isolated. He's the one who's sanctioned. He's the one who's indicted by the International Criminal Court. He's the one who can't travel to most countries in the world. And so for him, it's a big joy, and it's a big gift, and it's a big everything to be able to have a conversation for 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, with the most powerful man in the free world, the President of the United States. For Donald Trump, this is a way to sort of smooth over the fact that his diplomatic promise has been an abject failure.
So it's more to feed Putin's ego than Trump's, Bill.
Well, it's an exercise to try to sweep this whole thing under the carpet. I call this KGB rope-a-dope. The Russians just throw out an agreement to agree something for a future negotiation in which there'll be future decisions about future conversations, and nothing ever happens. And while all this is going on, he continues to execute his war. He continues to kill Ukrainian civilians. He continues to damage Ukrainian infrastructure. And that's what his intention is. He has no intention of stopping this war. For Vladimir Putin, this war is a war not to obtain territory. This is a war to show his people that he's the strong man. And in doing so, he needs to transfer their frustrations against him towards the frustrations against a foreign enemy. That's what this war is about. and he has no capacity whatsoever of backing down. In Russia, it's like a prison yard. You've got to be the toughest guy in the prison yard all the time, or somebody comes for you with a shank. And so he believes he's the king of the prison yard, but if he shows any weakness, any compromise, any negotiation, that weakness then means that other people are going to come for him with a shank, and he doesn't want that.
How do you think that's going, Bill? Do you think that Russians are looking at him right now and thinking that he is looking weak? We know that he's obviously doing this roundabout thing with Trump, this roundabout thing with Zelensky and the rest of the world. But the reality is that, as you and I have discussed at great lengths, Russia is not a great place to be living. The economy is dwindling. It's not a happy place. So I wonder if they're looking at Putin thinking, well, you're not doing a good job and your life is at risk.
Well, so the interesting thing is that he doesn't really care. He doesn't have to have Russian people love him. He's not running for election. There's no elections. Even when they have an election, it's not an election. It's a fraudulent election. He's a dictator. He's been in power 25 years, and he'll continue to be in power until the end of his life. All he needs to do is just have Russians fear him. They don't have to love him. They just have to fear him. And so they can absolutely hate him, but they have to fear him. And I think that that's where we are right now, because there's no real way that a Russian person can think, God, this guy's doing a great job for us. With very minor exceptions, everybody is worse off. The money is the country's money is frozen. The government's money is frozen. They can't move around freely to the rest of the world. There's sanctions. There's problems. There's economic dislocations. There's inflation. It's not a good situation. So the Russian people can hate him, and probably they all do privately. But all they have to do is fear him, because if they don't fear him, that's his big downside. That's where he ends up, hanging from a lamppost because of a coup.
But what about the people close to him, Bill? Because yes, normal Russian civilians, they can fear him, but it doesn't matter. As you said, he's not an elected leader. But what about those people that are not only close to him in a friendship or a work setting, but physically close to him in the sense that if they didn't like him, if they really thought that Russia would be better off without him, they could technically kill him.
Putin is bad at a lot of stuff, but the one thing he's really, really good at is paranoia. He's a paranoid little man. He's been paranoid since the day he came into office. And his paranoia leads him to a place where he finds disloyalty, and he finds potential coups where they don't exist. And so everybody who's around him, they're all terrified. They're terrified that Putin might think they're being disloyal when they're not being disloyal. And he's got every possible mechanism to sniff out where a potential coup might come from. And so I don't think there's any chance that anyone close to him physically or any other way will ever have a chance to take him out. The thing he's most afraid of is not like this individual or that individual. Those people he can kill, he can arrest, whatever. What he's most afraid of is like 1 million people marching on Red Square. That he can do nothing about. If 1 million people march on Red Square and want to, with their pitchforks, want to hang him, like they did Ceausescu in Romania, or what they did to Gaddafi with the bayonets in some underground tunnel in Libya, then he's got no control over the situation. And that's what he's afraid of. And the best way for him to keep the people with the pitchforks away is to be the toughest, strongest man around. And the best way to do that, and the only way to do that, is not to show any weakness, not to show any ability to compromise, to be the nastiest guy in the prison yard. And that's what this war in Ukraine is all about. And so for anyone who thinks that, okay, there's an off-ramp for Putin, that's just fantasy. I mean, of course, we would love that to be the case. And in other countries, that might very well be the case if there was such a situation where there's elections and there's other things that the leader has to worry about. But in Putin's case, he's an absolute dictator. He doesn't have to worry about that.
Exactly, Bill. And you've put it so eloquently, because I think that so many people who tune into the Russia-Ukraine war most of their first questions are, why hasn't Putin just been assassinated? And it's a fair question, but as you've put it, it's a little bit more complicated than that but it is an interesting question. Why has no one assassinated him? Because not everyone in Russia would like him. They wouldn't want to live this way. But you've put it so well. But I want to kind of get back to this proposal, because the ceasefire proposal was also kind of advertised as a memorandum aimed at ending the war. Trump says that this will begin immediately, but spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, he said it's clear that everyone wants to do this as quickly as possible, but of course the devil is in the details. Now, another example of Russia being the master at buying time. Is this just another example, another conversation of Russia just buying more time?
Of course, there's nothing that's happening that hasn't happened before. So a few days ago, there was this. So a week ago, Putin proposed that he was ready to negotiate, and then Trump leaned on Zelensky and said, "You have to negotiate with Putin." So Zelensky said, "Okay, I'll negotiate. I'll go to Istanbul." And then Putin said, "Well, actually, I'm not coming." And then he sent a group of nobodies to Istanbul with a bunch of stuff on paper. This is the same stuff that they put on paper for Istanbul, is that what they would put on paper for this framework for negotiation, which is they want Ukraine to withdraw from Ukrainian territory. They want Ukraine to demilitarize. They put one of the conditions that there's no war reparations. These are completely unacceptable conditions. And so what will happen is there'll be some announcement that they've been unable to come to terms, and the war will carry on, because the terms that Russia has proposed are not negotiating terms. They're surrender terms, and Ukraine is not planning on surrendering now or anytime soon.
But Bill, even if, say in a hypothetical situation, these two countries sign a peace deal, they even sign a 30-day ceasefire, what is the point? Because do we really believe that Putin is going to respect that?
Absolutely not. Putin has already signed two previous peace deals. There was something called the Minsk I agreement, and then there was the Minsk II agreement. And they dishonored the agreements within seconds and broke the ceasefire, immediately, and kept on breaking the ceasefire up until the point where they launched not just a sort of surreptitious invasion, but a full-scale invasion. And so I wouldn't trust anything Putin says, but I don't think we're ever going to get there. Putin's never going to make any promises of a peace deal. It would be against his interests to do so. And so I think that, again, this is all just KGB rope-a-dope, just prolong, prevaricate, delay, and every other thing so that they can carry on the war. Putin thinks the war is going well for him from the perspective of look, Donald Trump has broken with the Europeans. Yesterday, the Europeans announced sanctions. America didn't announce sanctions. It's clear that Putin geopolitically is starting to gain an advantage because Trump is in the White House.
Mm. And we've been waiting for those sanctions from the US, and it is great that the EU has stepped up bills we've spoken about. But okay, say this conversation between Ukraine and Russia does take place the way Donald Trump says it will immediately. The situation that we would probably see is Zelensky saying, back off, get out of our country, accept that we are a sovereign country and it's not up for grabs, it's not for sale, it's not to be having you storm through. And then Putin would say, no, you need to concede the regions that we've now occupied. You need to recognize that Crimea is ours. You need to give up trying to get a NATO membership. You need to destabilize your military. And you need to confirm that the United States will never give you security. Is that it?
Well, I think you've actually missed out on a bunch of stuff. Putin wants Ukraine to withdraw from territory that Russia doesn't even occupy. Putin wants no reparations. He wants all sanctions lifted by the world. His ambitions are so radically unrealistic that there's no way that anyone can accept that. Perhaps Donald Trump can accept that, but nobody else can.
Are you worried, Bill, that Donald Trump will, because we've seen him propose these ceasefire proposals to Russia, and it would include Russia actually occupying these 4 regions, 4 plus more, regions of Ukraine. Are you worried that Donald Trump will continue to say, yes, you can have those regions, even if nothing is broken, even if Ukraine doesn't back down, which we know that they won't? But are you worried that Donald Trump still won't take it seriously, that it's incredibly bizarre to be giving this territory to Russia?
Well, Donald Trump has already said he effectively wants Ukraine to surrender. He blamed the war on Ukraine for not surrendering. He said that, back in the week of the horrific Oval Office tirade, he was like said it was Zelensky's fault that this war started because Russia had the cards and Ukraine doesn't have the cards, and he shouldn't have stood up to Russia. And so Trump has been very transparent about the whole thing. The one thing we can't criticize Trump on is being deceitful. He's been completely upfront through his campaign, and after he was inaugurated, he's been very clear. He's on Putin's side, and so I think that we just need to come to that understanding, and then adjust, our behavior accordingly, so that we can figure out how to help Ukraine without Donald Trump's support.
But we have wondered, Bill, if Donald Trump was edging closer to be on Ukraine's side. So what do you think it will take for Trump to publicly come out and actually completely take Ukraine's side?
I don't think it would take anything. I don't think he's going to do it. He's not. He's made it very clear, and he's not going to side with Ukraine.
And you think that's because there's something going on between them? And we spoke about this last week. You think that there's something kind of fishy going on between the two of them?
I don't know what's going on between the two of them, but what I can say is that it doesn't serve the American national interest to do that. It doesn't serve American people are not friends with Putin. They don't think Putin's a good guy. American people think that Ukraine is the victim. American people think that Ukraine deserves U.S. support. U.S. Republicans think the same thing. And so Trump is taking a contrary position to his base, the American people, the political establishment in Washington, and he's got to have some reason for doing that. We don't know what that reason is, but it must be a pretty good reason, because he's really kind of gone out on a limb here for Vladimir Putin.
But is there reason to believe that could be because Americans had grown frustrated with the amount of aid going to Ukraine? And we know that in a scale of aid, what Ukraine was getting is not a significant amount, but it is a big amount compared to the average American who thinks that money should be in America, America first, who really believe that MAGA rhetoric that we need to stop, the United States needs to stop giving so much money to other countries. I wonder if Donald Trump has taken that so literally.
Well, if you read the recent opinion polls, the majority of Americans think that Ukraine should get more support, not less. And as you mentioned, the numbers are relatively small when you look at it in context. So we're talking about roughly 5% of the U.S. military budget, which to destroy the U.S. main adversary, to destroy their military capacity with no loss of American life. That's probably the best investment that America could ever make. And so it kind of doesn't make sense from any standpoint, other than the standpoint of whatever Donald Trump is doing, thinking, getting from this odd, perplexing approach towards this war.
And he clearly thinks that there's a villain in the state of the world right now, Bill, if he's willing to invest billions and billions and billions of dollars in building America's Iron Dome.
Well, that's sort of more traditional, Republican hawkish defense policy, which makes sense. But then to hand over the keys to one of your two main adversaries doesn't make any sense at all.
So after this phone call on Monday, Bill, Trump said that him and Putin spoke about long-scale trade with the United States and Russia. He also said that Kyiv would also benefit from this. But look, I'm not going to say that that's a bribe, but is committing to trade with Russia and the United States enough incentive for Vladimir Putin to put down his weapons?
Well, there wasn't that much trade that going on between Russia and the United States before the war began. What does Russia do? Russia is an oil and gas producer. They're the second largest oil and gas producer in the world. Who's the first largest? The United States of America. We don't need their oil and gas. They can't sell their oil and gas to the United States. What else do they make? Nothing. They make nothing. They make nothing in Russia. All they do is dig out raw materials and sell them to more sophisticated countries that don't have such a catastrophic business infrastructure. And so I don't know what business he's talking about. Now, if Putin really wants to do business, the people he needs to satisfy are the Europeans. The Europeans were doing a ton of business with Putin because the Europeans were buying all the gas and a lot of the oil and selling a lot of their products into Russia. And so if he really wants to fix his economy, he needs to find a way to make the Europeans happy. And of course, the Europeans are not going to be happy unless he withdraws from Ukraine. So Putin's kind of stuck either way.
So on a financial perspective, if we're going against oil and gas providers and we're putting these two up as competitors, the United States and Russia, it actually is financially in the United States' best interest to be placing tariffs on any country importing Russian oil.
Indeed, it would, of course, every tough measure against Putin would be in the U.S. national interest, in the U.S. economic interest, in the U.S. security interest, and the U.S. geopolitical interest. And that's why it's so perplexing that Trump is taking this view of basically saying to Vladimir Putin, you can kind of do what you want over there.
Bill, Trump told a reporter that this is not his war and that he does have a red line in his head of when he's going to withdraw the United States from these discussions. Do you have anything? Do you hypothesize? Do you have anything in your head of what that red line might be?
I have no idea. What I can say is that the threat that he's making is actually a threat against Ukraine. The threat is that he's going to withdraw from the war, not from these discussions, from the war. And what does that mean? That he's going to withdraw any U.S. military support for Ukraine. And so from Putin's perspective, that's the best thing ever. So stonewall, prevaricate, don't do anything, and then frustrate Trump, who made all these campaign promises to end the war in 24 hours. Trump says, this is not my war, and therefore it's not his war. He's not going to continue to support the Ukrainians. Reading between the lines, that's really what's going on here.
What I find bizarre is that, reports, headlines, everything in media will say Trump growing frustrated with Putin and Zelenskyy. And I find it so bizarre that we emphasize this growing frustrated with Zelenskyy because he's not doing anything. He's just trying to protect his country. Putin's the one putting all these concessions out. He's the one, that started this war. Zelensky's not doing anything other than asking for aid, other than asking for support to avoid having a war that would seep into further countries other than Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing is preposterous that Zelenskyy would be, seen as anything other than the hero. And by the way, he's seen by any reasonable person in the world as a hero. When he walked into Notre Dame Cathedral after they rebuilt it, I think Trump was really he was really surprised that everybody was cheering and clapping for Zelenskyy.
It is an odd thing to watch. But just finally, Bill, it's unrelated to Donald Trump, but we will discuss it. Under your global Magnitsky justice campaign, you've been busy advocating for Ryan Cornelius, who's been wrongfully arrested and jailed since 2008. You've tried your hand along with Ryan Cornelius's wife to get the attention of the UK government. You've had no success. They've been quite quiet on you to get him out of jail, bring him back to the UK. But you've gone to the Irish government and spoken to them, and you've had more success. So walk us through that.
Well, it's very interesting. So Ryan Cornelius is a British national He was a very successful businessman in the Middle East. He developed real estate and other projects in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, in the United Arab Emirates and Pakistan. And he had a very large real estate project in Dubai. In the global financial crisis, the Dubai authorities went into a terrible economic financial tailspin, and they decided they wanted the property back that he was developing. And instead of offering him money, they arrested him, kept him in solitary confinement. While he was in solitary confinement, he couldn't make payments on a loan from Dubai Islamic Bank, and his loan defaulted. They seized his property and all his other properties, including his home in London where his wife was living, and bankrupted his family, bankrupted him, and then sentenced him to 10 years in prison for fraud. At the end of the 10 years, the Dubai Islamic Bank, the bank that lent him the money, then came back and said, we want him to serve another 20 years. He's been in jail for 17 years. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has reviewed the case and determined that he's been wrongfully detained. He should be released. He should be paid compensation. That this whole thing was a complete stitch-up. And sadly, the British government, for many years, did absolutely nothing. I mean, they're now a little bit more active, but pretty much for most of the time did absolutely nothing to help this poor man. 17 years, he just turned 71 years old. The Dubai authorities have a law saying that when you turn 70, you should be released for compassionate purposes. They refuse to release him. The Dubai Islamic Bank is desperate to keep him in jail until he dies. And so we were looking at, what could we do? And one of the things that we noticed was that his wife, Heather Cornelius, is an Irish citizen. And so we went to Ireland. And I don't know how many viewers here are Irish, but we were amazed at how Irish people have a really strong sense of justice and right and wrong. And we had a very, very positive reaction from members of the Senate and the lower house of Parliament, and even the civil servants in government. And we just finished a one-day trip to Brussels, where we met a number of MEPs, including all the Irish MEPs, and hopefully the Irish pick up on this thing as well. And so it's hard to say what's going to happen, but now we've got at least another country interested in this terrible injustice, which should just not be happening.
And just good to have had a meeting, Bill. Just good to have been, at the table with members of Parliament after the UK government, really let Ryan down and have kept him in jail practically and not done enough. So good on the Irish for helping you out. And we'll be watching that situation as you get more updates. So Bill Browder, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you.